It is waiver claim madness, and the Marlins could have an opportunity to upgrade their roster heading into September. They dropped the game against the Rays. However, this episode is all about the opportunity that the Marlins face into here. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England. Welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I, of course, am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on X at Miami Marlins _UK. If you listen to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. Leave a review also, guys. Always appreciated. Appreciated. This is your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. This is Wednesday, the 30th of August. We are almost at September, and things just got spicy. A lot spicier than anticipated. There is a YouTube channel, of course, guys. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, there is a YouTube channel. Head on over there, hit subscribe also. We are trending over there on YouTube, which is great to see. We are over 1,000 subscribers now, in case you missed it. Guys, I mentioned it's the Wednesday episode. It's been 3 solo pods in a row. 3 solo pods. We're going to rectify that at the back end of the week. It's going to be guests piling in. And there's probably going to be plenty to discuss. This episode primarily is going to be focused on the Angels. This isn't Locked On Angels, by the way, but the Angels caused a stir, it's fair to say. Equally, the Yankees made some moves. So did a couple of other clubs. There was just generally some action happening. So, the Angels were the spotlighted team because of the sheer volume that they put out there. But the Yankees, we have to say, equally doing some bits. Josh Donaldson, Harrison Bader, 2 big names. Big names that ended up effectively being cut, as was Carlos Carrasco, as were a number of Angels guys. All waived. And at this juncture, 30th of August, this gets interesting. Very interesting for a lot of clubs, a lot of contending clubs potentially. Let's start with the why. Why has this happened? What are the rules? What does it mean for the Marlins? What does it mean for other clubs? Let's start with the why. Guys that are being, the Angels particularly, they were the ones I looked into. Why is it happening? Fundamentally, these guys are free agents. They're pending free agents, and they don't have any compensation picks attached to them. There's no qualifying offer situations. All that stuff we've been talking about with Roy Soler. It's irrelevant in these situations. So the Angels at this point are effectively saying, we aren't in it. We are legitimately waving the white flag at this point. Waving that white flag. These guys, we really have no use for them for the next month because we're out of it. So what we're going to do, we're going to place them on waivers, and we're going to see if any other clubs, likely contending clubs, because there's no control beyond this current year, if any contending clubs can see value in these guys, they get them for free, effectively from a trade perspective or a transactional perspective. However, and this is why the Angels are doing it, the club that claims them carries the money for the rest of the year, whatever that may be. And there's, variance in those numbers. So, many people going, what the hell are the Angels doing? I know what the Angels are doing, and they're right to do it. They're pumping these guys out there. The season's cooked, and they're trying to save, I think it totals about $8 million. $8 million is a lot of money. A lot of money. The Angels have no use for these guys, and maybe other clubs will. It's going to be the interesting part, is what happens here. So, in terms of what it means more generally and for the Marlins, one rule change historically used to be a situation where the Angels, they sit in the AL. You would go, waiver priority would be 1-15 or 15-1 in the AL, 15-1 in the NL. So AL teams would have priority over NL. Doesn't exist anymore. This is just straight up. All teams can put a claim in. If there are any If there are multiple claims on a player, then the team that has the lowest winning percentage right there at that moment will get the player. Teams can make multiple claims. So in theory, the Marlins could look to claim 8 dudes at this point if they wanted. They'd have to clear the roster space. They'd have to find a way to clear the roster space, but they could. So in theory, the Marlins could claim 8 dudes if no one else below them, in terms of winning percentage, would actually look to put in some claims. The funny thing is, that now comes back around to the Marlins now. The funny thing is because the way the Marlins have they're at the bottom end of what I would say is in it, particularly from an NL perspective and a wildcard perspective. They're trending towards the bottom of that pile. So in terms of contending teams that are still contending, and the Marlins are probably have the lowest winning percentage of them. Thus, this actually creates a really interesting opportunity for the Miami Marlins to add at least one guy. And I think they will add at least one of these guys that have been waived, particularly by the Angels. I think they'll look to add one. There's talk about them putting in potentially multiple claims for multiple guys. Multiple claims for multiple guys. Looking to put in multiple claims overall, which in effect is multiple guys. Still following me? The reality is the Marlins won't be interested in everyone, and they shouldn't be. I'm going to talk about these guys specifically, about what they've been doing this season, and not so much why they've been waived. They've been waived for that reason. That it isn't overly performance related. Some of it is, but equally, it's just the fact that the clubs just have no use for them. If the Marlins weren't in it this year, let's say, this, for example, they may have looked to do something like this with Joey Wendell, for example, where it's a pending free agent. They're not going to offer him a qualifying offer. There's no compensatory pick coming back. They look to maybe just move the rest of Joey Wendell's money, whatever that may be at this point. The Marlins are still in it. However, I will talk about Joey Wendell and one potential situation where he may end up being waived or DFA'd, however you want to phrase it, as a corresponding move. So we'll talk about that shortly. So hopefully you're still following me. I know a lot of people are pointing to the Angels to say this is just malpractice. This is crazy. It isn't. This isn't. This is the right thing to do. They have no use for the guys, and it's just all about saving money in the final month for guys that can't help them because their season is cooked. They went to try. I don't know, let's just briefly talk about the Angels. I get what they did. They thought, we've had a good run just before the deadline. Actually, let's just go for it. And that's what many people kind of talk about and go, we just, as a fan base, we want our teams to go for it. We want our teams in it. And the Angels look to do that. They made some big moves. They've emptied the farm even more. However you view farms and farm systems and all that kind of rah-rah. I'm not a farm system guy, but the Angels did right by Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani and the rest of the crew around. Went and tried to buy and acquire like the Marlins did. And the reality is it didn't work for the Angels. They fell apart subsequently. And in reality, so have the Marlins. Were their deadline moves poor? I don't know. Sometimes the team just doesn't win. So there's some symmetry here with the Marlins and Angels. The difference being that the Marlins had built such a cushion that's meant that they are still in it. If the Marlins were in and around 500 towards the deadline, let's say, or, somewhere in that range, and then they acquired Bell and Berger and, all the other stuff they've done, and then continue to play the way they have, they'd be out of it now as well. So the fact that the Marlins had built the cushion meant that they aren't actually in this position. The Marlins and Angels, I think the Marlins have been even worse, to be honest with you, but the cushion helped them. So that sets the scene. I don't blame the Angels for this. I don't blame the Yankees for what they've done. I don't blame the Mets for what they've done with Carrasco. This is what it is, and this is pure, can we save some money, and can any one of these contending teams see value in these guys to help them? And it will help us by not having to pay the salary. Pretty simple. But there are some interesting players that the Angels have waived in particular. One of the guys from the Yankees equally, I think, is very interesting from the Marlins as well. So we're going to go through those players very shortly. Before we do that, let's talk about our good friends over at LinkedIn Sales. Yes, sir. Are you struggling to close deals? Cold outreach is wasting the time of both the buyer and the seller at every stage, especially when sellers are using shallow and outdated data. Your organization can overcome these challenges with technology that translates comprehensive, high-quality buyer data into real-time insights. These deeper insights empower sales reps and teams to adopt the habits of top performers, which leads to better outcomes, like more pipeline, higher win rates, and larger deals, baby. We call this deep sales, and we've built the first deep sales platform with the next generation of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a free 60-day trial. For a 60-day free trial, let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon to get yourself started. All right, guys, thanks for joining me, Peter Pratt, on Wednesday's episode of Locked On Marlins. There is plenty of Angels talk in this episode, no doubt about it. And this episode is titled Waiver Wire Madness. It's the wire, baby, and the Marlins are going to be active, in my opinion, on this wire. Because fundamentally, there are some guys that can help them. And yes, they have to pay the salaries, but no prospect capital, no big league capital has to go the other way. Fundamentally, if no one below the Marlins makes any claims, then they're in effect picking first, and they can make multiple claims. So, who is available? Who do I think the Marlins will target? And where does this all end? Let's start with what I think is from a pitcher perspective, the biggest name. And that's Lucas Giolito. Big name, a guy that has been obviously with the White Sox for many years, and like everything to do with the White Sox this year, it all fell apart. It's all fell apart, and he was traded to the Angels. The Angels ended up giving, I believe, a top 100 prospect back as part of a deal for Giolito and Reynaldo Lopez that we'll talk about shortly. So Lucas Giolito, let's just be totally honest. His numbers with the Angels, terrible. 6.89 ERA. Not good. Who's he faced? In the time he's been with the Angels, this is who Lucas Giolito has had to face. It has been the Blue Jays, Bravos. They absolutely blew him up, by the way. The Giants, the Rangers, the Reds, the Phillies. Lucas Giolito has had such a tough run. And here's the reason why the Angels have fallen out of it. Boy, oh boy, their schedule has been brutal, it seems. Just as brutal as the Marlins, maybe. And there's some obvious correlation there, right? These teams that Giolito's been facing, they are good. 6.89 ERA with the Angels, like I mentioned. So, do the Marlins need Lucas Giolito? I think this is one of the interesting questions, one of the interesting situations here. They were in the market for a starting pitcher at the deadline. It's reported, I think, that they were in on a pitcher. They couldn't get a deal done. You know, other pitching is hard to find. Starting pitching, good starting pitching, hard to find. So, Lucas Giolito, do the Marlins still have a need? Well, I think they do. Nothing has fundamentally changed from prior to the deadline, really, because Johnny Cueto wasn't hurt. He's now hurt, but he's just due to come back and likely to maybe return in the weekend series against the Nats. Edward Cabrera, I think, was already optioned at that point. Yuri Perez was working his way back up. Now we get reports from Craig Mish today saying Yuri Perez starts against the Nats, rightly so. And then the vibe now is not 120 innings limit and done for Yuri Perez. It's now he will be able to carry on until the Marlins are no longer in it. They're very different. That's very different. That's a very different situation. They may switch to a 6-man rotation, is also talked about. So do the Marlins need Lucas Giolito? I think if they were buying starting pitching, which they were at the deadline, I don't think anything's changed. The rosters will expand on the first anyway. So that maybe makes it interesting and an easier way to have a 6-man rotation. But as we sit here right now, we've just recently had a bullpen game with Brian Hoeing taking the majority of innings. Do the Marlins need a starting pitcher? They do. Could Lucas Giolito be the guy? Do you trust Giolito over Ryan Weathers? I'd say yes right now. I'd say yes. In terms of history, yes. Is anyone else going to claim Giolito? I don't know. But do I think the Marlins claim Giolito? My gut feel is yes. They have a need. They still have a need. They've got Yuri Perez that they're still trying to manage. Brax, Luzardo, they're trying to manage everyone. Would another veteran arm help the Marlins right now? I think it would. Okay. So there we go. Let's call it and lock it in. The Marlins make a claim on Lucas Giolito. Reynaldo Lopez came over in the same deal from the Angels. Righty reliever. That should send alert emojis immediately. A righty reliever available. Former starter, transition to the pen. 2022, really good out of the pen for the White Sox. Had a 2.79 ERA. 2023, not as good. No White Sox was any good in 23, to be honest with you. But still okay. Still okay with a 4.29 ERA. But going to the Angels, it's returned. The form has returned. He's a 2.31 ERA. However, the whip is a 1.46, just to call that out. Fundamentally, Reynaldo Lopez, he's a righty guy that strikes out a ton of guys. He has some walk issues, always has. In reality, he is Edward Cabrera out of the bullpen. Maybe. And this profile is similar to Edward Cabrera. And actually, Edward Cabrera's career may end up looking really similar to Reynaldo Lopez's. We'll wait to see. But the Marlins still have Eddie Cabrera working it as a starter. They still have guys in their bullpen that I don't think they trust. I don't think they trust Robertson. I don't think they trust Jorge Lopez. I think Reynaldo Lopez is a huge upgrade for this bullpen. This is, and I've described this in my notes here. You can't see my notes, but because I'm not doing this off the top of my head, just for in case anyone is wondering, Pete, how are you doing this? This one take wonder of an episode as a solo host. Are you remembering all of this, Pete? No, I've got some notes in front of me that I'm actually working from. But in my notes, I have down must add, and that is in caps, all caps, must add for the Marlins, in my opinion. That's what I wrote. Reynaldo Lopez is a must add. The Marlins, I'm 100% certain that they will look to claim, they will put a claim in for Reynaldo Lopez. And they should do. They should do. He could be an impact righty arm immediately. Corresponding move, who knows? Rosters are opening up anyway. He could be the extra reliever. Who knows? But the Marlins need all the help they can get from the right side because Robertson has not worked. It hasn't worked, and it's leaving them short in that spot. All right, what about another guy, another reliever? It's reported, seemingly, Bob Nightingale, if you trust that level of reporting, that the Marlins are maybe looking to put in a couple of claims for a couple of relievers. In some ways, this is probably who he's talking about. In Matt Moore, what I would say with Matt Moore, he's a lefty. The Marlins, do they need a lefty reliever? I would say no. No, they don't. They've got too many lefties. However, let's just look at the numbers. Let's look at the production and think, could you find a spot for this production in your bullpen? Particularly, again, with expanded rosters. So, Matt Moore, I was thinking, Matt Moore, is he a reliever? I then remembered, he went to the Phillies in 21. He was in their rotation for a while. The Marlins had a game in that where they completely blew him up. And I think that was at the end or towards the back end of his time as a starter. He then transitioned to the pen, but fundamentally with the Phillies in 21, terrible. Transitioned fully into the pen in 22, and he excelled with the Rangers. Excelled. With the Angels this year, he's having a stunning year. He's got a 2.30 ERA. He's had 20 holds this season. He's got an 0.98 whip, less than one whip, and he's only had one blowy. Some decent numbers there from Matt Moore. No doubt about it. 2.30 ERA, 0.98 whip. I mean, some would look at that and go, I mean, is that better than Stephen Okert? Is that better than AJ Puck? Is that better than Tanner Scott? No, it's not. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, those numbers from Matt Moore, they are eye-popping. And with that, considering, the need the Marlins have for these bullpen arms and some of the lack of trust that maybe they have, should the Marlins look to also make a claim on Matt Moore? Could the Marlins maybe look to make three waiver claims here from Angels arms? Lucas Giolito, Reynaldo Lopez, and Matt Moore. I absolutely wouldn't rule it out. All of these guys can contribute. Every single one of them. What's it going to cost the Marlins? Couple of million extra. I don't know. Can they find the spots on the roster? Yes. Can they find the spots on the 40-man? Yes. I think so. I think there's ways to make this happen if they really want it. What about some of the sticks? Because listen, I know we've talked a lot about the arms. The Marlins did make some good acquisitions at the deadline for the sticks. However, the offense has been so cold since. Is there a way that they maybe drop in someone to try and shake it up? Maybe. What's available? Hunter Renfroe, let's start there. So, he wasn't having his best year, it's fair to say, by his standards, but he's a career 780 OPS guy, Hunter Renfroe. He's got 18 home runs this year, by the way, and a strong track record of hitting for power. He hit 29 home runs in 2022. He hit 31 with the Red Sox in 21. He hit 33 for the Padres in 2019. Hunter Renfroe is a proven power stick, playing a bit of outfield, bit of DH. I do wonder, Renfroe, right? All of a sudden, maybe with Jorge Soler hurting himself yesterday, do you need a Jorge Soler backup? Do you need a guy that maybe can play a bit of outfield and maybe DH, whatever, just in case? Because if Jorge Soler goes down for any sustained period, and listen, let me tell you about the Marlins and their assessment of injuries. Every time someone exits a game and says, hey, I'm going to be back in tomorrow, he's never back in. And then he's normally out for multiple weeks. If the Marlins lose Jorge Soler for any sustained period and have no backup plan, then they're fully cooked. Fully cooked, in my opinion. They can't trust Griffin Conine, Peyton Burdick, Taylor Encarnacion. They can't. I trust Hunter Renfroe over any of those dudes. And to be honest with you, you got to think, like, would you prefer Hunter Renfroe or would you prefer Garrett Hampson on the roster right now? It's a good question. I think he's an interesting option. I must say, Baseball Savant hates his profile, by the way. So go and check out Hunter Renfroe's profile. Savant hates it right this year. Blue everywhere. Blue. Randal Grichuk. He was terrible with the Angels after the trade. Hit him 165. However, he was having a really nice year with the Rockies. He hit over 300. That, to me, sounds more like a Marlins profile. Savant likes his exit velo. He likes his XBA batting average. Doesn't like him in the field, however. He's not an upgrade over Brian De La Cruz. He's not an upgrade over Jesus Sanchez, to be honest with you, at this point. And so you got to wonder, like Randal Grichuk, is there value there of the Marlins already covered? I think so. I don't think he's a needle mover. I do think Renfroe's a different proposition. I do think it pertains maybe to Jorge Soler, potentially. Would the Marlins look to do something? I'm not certain, particularly if they're already going to make 3 claims. I mean, they can make as many claims as they want, so it doesn't overly matter, but we'll see. Dominic Leone was also waived by the Angels. We won't even bother talking about him. There's no use, in my opinion. They were the notes I made. He's been terrible. The Marlins don't need him. Listen, we don't need terrible relievers that we don't trust. Let's move on. Here's another guy that I think is very interesting, and it's Harrison Bader. Harrison Bader, baby. Why is he interesting, and what would this mean? This is where things get a little bit fruity, to be honest with you. They get fruity because fundamentally Harrison Bader he's not just a projected Gold Glove candidate in center field. He's just an absolute stud in center field. No doubt. He's got 8 outs above average this season in center field for the Yankees. Amazing glove in center field. It's what the Marlins were looking for a long, long time. Jazz has done what he's done, helped the team perform well. However, I do wonder at this point if they think, actually, do we bring in Bader? Stick him in center field, stud. Underwhelming stick, by the way. Underwhelming. Hasn't been good. Had one decent year, let's say, with the Cardinals. But, I I don't know. He's a 250, 260 hitter with Gold Glove defense in center field. Would he be worth adding right now? Maybe just as a bench bat, as a defensive replacement. Would he add value? I think he could. I think I saw that role for Jonathan Davis, to be honest with you. I could see value in that. And in effect, Bader could maybe play that same role. The other thought process, again, this is where the fruit comes in, level of fruitiness here. Do the Marlins bring in Bader and think, let's commit to Bader at center field and let's get Jazz into shortstop. Let Jazz play shortstop the rest of the way. Bader in at center, unbelievable glove. Jazz in at shortstop, unbelievable athlete. What would that mean for Joey Wendell? DFA'd. So it would be a huge domino effect. Bader into center field, Jazz into shortstop, Wendell probably DFA'd. Maybe they could find it. Maybe they keep him on the roster. They could do. I don't know. It'd be a wild one. And it's funny how the Marlins had like 0 center fielders. Jazz then transitions out there, becomes a stud. Jonathan Davis was acquired via trade, became a stud, then hurt himself. Harrison Bader now available, is a stud. I mean, who knows? This could be interesting. Could be really, really interesting. Do they do this one? I don't think they do. I think they're happy with Jazz and center. And I think that's the way they leave it for now. Carlos Carrasco, the only final other guy to mention. Well, unless you want to talk about Josh Donaldson. We're not going to talk about him. The Marlins aren't going there. Carlos Carrasco, what about him? He's been putrid. He's been terrible. And as much as the Marlins need a starter, they have other starters there that they could choose. Lucas Giolito being the obvious one. I don't think Carrasco is an upgrade over Cueto at this point, to be honest with you. Which, frankly, is pretty wild to say. I didn't expect to be saying that, but I am going to say it. Carlos Carrasco is not an upgrade over Johnny Cueto. And with that being said, I don't think the Marlins go there. So, in summary, where do we go? Here's where I'm at. I think the Marlins will make at least 2 claims. I think Lucas Giolito is a no-brainer claim. I think Reynaldo Lopez is a no-brainer claim. They were looking for Giolito at the deadline. Nothing's changed, and the Marlins still have that need. They were looking for Reynaldo Lopez at the deadline. Nothing has changed other than the fact that they've got Robertson and he's flamed out. He's cooked. Let's move on from Robertson. Let's get Lopez in there instead. Why not? Let's do it. Matt Moore, I'm on the fence. His numbers are very impressive. Very impressive. Do the Marlins have too many lefties? Maybe. Hunter Renfroe is an interesting option. Proven power stick. Much more proven than Avisail Garcia, for example. This dude actually has hit more than 30 home runs on multiple occasions. If Jorge Soler if there's any concern over Soler, right now in this injury that he's dealing with, they should put a claim in for Renfroe. Protect themselves. Give themselves an insurance policy, because if Soler goes down and that power profile goes down, Marlins are banging trouble. Randal Grichuk, straight up no. Dominic Leone, straight up no. Harrison Bader, interesting. Bench bat, maybe. I could see it. Is he, what's he owed? Let's say he's owed $800,000 the rest of the way. I don't know the exact number. I think he was owed $4.5 million this year in total. So let's say he's owed $800,000 or $500,000. Is that worth it for a bench stick? 8 outs above average at center field thus far? I think so. Could the Marlins go really crazy and put Bader in and start him at center field and say to Jazz, back to shortstop, brother, and let's ride? They could do. And it would be wild. But the Marlins need to shake it up a bit here. Like, they've not found a way. They've found ways to lose games. They just haven't been themselves. They haven't. Skip kind of called it out post-game in the presser yesterday. They haven't been themselves. They haven't been able to get runners over. They've had like so many leadoff doubles, and they've stranded them time after time after time. It's not been good. It's not been the Marlins baseball we expected. The first half was exactly what I expected, and it's kind of tailed back away. It's been like 2022 Marlins baseball. Frustration. Carlos Carrasco? No, not a chance. Guys, it's going to wrap us up. It's 30 minutes of waiver wire madness. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. And listen, share it. Tell your friends. I've done a bit of a deep dive there on all the guys that are available. And in reality, this pertains to any contending club. Excuse me. Any contending club, all the fan base are thinking the same thing. Let me know what you think. Let me know how wild I am, because I don't follow these players closely. I'm trying my best to kind of dig into it and look at what they've been doing, but I don't follow them closely. And I'm not a huge numbers guy and an analytics guy and expected anything guy. So I'm just going my gut feel on these ones. But I know the Marlins are in the hunt for a pitcher. They need some help in the bullpen. It's clear. And I think they may need an insurance policy for Soler. And then the interesting bit is, do they get wild with the center field situation? Bring in Bader, stud, and move Jazz back to the infield. Thanks for joining me on Locked On Marlins and making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, guys. Of course, I'm going to be back on Thursday. The Loud Marlins fan is back. What seemingly now a regular rotation for him on a Thursday. We'll look forward to seeing you then.